Greetings and welcome to Legacies of Wavryn, Lore of the Endelment. This will be chapter 26 of this reading. The whisper, the goddamn whisper. Again it came to me. Why? Why wouldn't it just shut the hell up? I had nothing to do with the ancients. I had nothing to do with them. I had nothing to do with the Endelment. So why did I even bother? The whisper came to me while I was unconscious, but it was much calmer the fourth time around, as it said, "Why do you deny what is rightfully yours? You know it to be true. They may be right. You're too stubborn for your own good. However, that does not matter. It is still in you, even if you were to change to the point where you were nothing but dust. You can't escape your fate. We will see our world reborn. You will become the new symbol of our kind. The ancients shall come forth once again and take control of what was rightfully ours. But you must. You must bring forth the end. Bring forth the beginning. Bring forth hope. Please, for all of us, don't give up." For what seemed like days of sleep, I started to wake and heard three voices talk amongst themselves. They sounded as if they were standing over me. At the same time, my right arm was in a lot of pain, like someone had torn it to shreds. Oh yeah, that's right. "Is he dead?" a quiet and soothing voice asked. A small bird chirped. Then another voice that sounded like a wannabe gangsta teenager said, "No way, man. Dog's a Kexon. He's just out. Why don't you peck him?" a rough and slightly vicious voice asked. "Maybe then he'll wake up." "Hell nah. Why don't you bite him?" "I don't do things on command like a dog, chicken." "Hey, I ain't not chicken, but besides, Jack was the one who wants to know. Make him do it." I moaned as I started to open my eyes, barely able to see three blurry figures standing over me. Also, I felt small feet on my forehead with tiny claws that were slightly digging into my skin. As I opened my eyes, a bird chirped again, then the teenager voice said, "Oh crap, he's waking up." With that, the rough voice responded with, "Maybe your annoying chirping woke him up." "Fool, I'd knock you out for talking shit like that." "Come on, guys," a quiet voice said. "Can we not fight right now? We have a guest that... Who gives a crap about our guest?" a teenage voice barked. "Canine here is about to get stomped out." Just as my eyes opened and focused, I saw a light blue feathered barn swallow with a black underbelly standing on my forehead as it leaned over my face. There was also a gray wolf with bright, light yellow eyes that stood over my right side. Last was a white and brown jackrabbit that stood at my left side, who seemed slightly fearful to my presence. I glanced between the three creatures and asked, "Who the hell are you guys?" Without paying any attention to me, the wolf turned to the bird on my head and growled at him as he said, "I can eat you in one bite, chickadee." The bird jumped on my head to turn towards the wolf and said, "Bitch, don't make me peck your eyes out." Guys," the rabbit said to try and get his friend's attention. However, they ignored him and continued to argue between each other. After a few seconds, the rabbit said, "Guys, he's awake now." The bird jumped and turned to the rabbit as he said, "Shut it, Jack. Can't you see I'm talking here?" The bird jumped and turned back to face the wolf as he continued to argue, which I finally stopped by quickly raising my left hand to grab the bird to shut him up, nearly choking him. I then sat myself up and tossed him out from my right side. I flew around the wolf's head once and then landed on top of it to face me. I looked over at the bird with an angry expression as I adjusted my glasses and asked, "Where am I?" The bird chirped as he shook himself a bit, then replied, "Dude, How do you not know where you are? I looked around to see that the place I was in was once again the realm of gods. This time, there were hundreds of thousands of different animals playing around in the meadow area, with some of them relaxing on some of the hills. Mountains in the distance were not larger than last time, but there were two unique mountains that stood opposite each other. The one at the north was pitch black, with golden snow that covered the top of it, and the one to the south was bright white, with baby blue snow on it. After I looked around, I turned back to say something to the bird, but all three of the creatures that were around me had disappeared. With that, I stood up and looked around again, confused, as I tried to figure out where they went. However, I couldn't find a hint or trace of them. I examined myself to find that I was still in my Legacy form, yet I just powered down from it. I also found that my right arm had 5 pitch black jagged scars that went down from the middle of my upper arm all the way past my hand, the pulsing pain of them increasing when I got out of the illumined state. Even though I could keep myself from showing battle scars, these ones seemed as though they would never disappear. And this was that Rakara was no longer hanging on my back, but the crystal in my pocket was still with me. Once I finished my self-examination, a nice female voice said, "You're still that cute little boy I met all those years ago." I quickly turned around to see a woman that was about 5 feet 4 inches tall, staring at me with an electric blue right eye and an electric purple left, sitting about 4 feet from me. I didn't figure out who she was right off the bat, but after a few seconds I realized what she was. I was so shocked that I fell back on my ass. This woman wasn't Ibeki. In fact, she was the very same Ibeki that I met long ago when I was just a simple little prince. Yet for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what her name was. She hadn't changed a bit. She was still the beautiful Siberian husky Ibeki from when I first met her. She sat down with her knees up to her chest and her arms wrapped around her legs, while her long and puffy tail wagged from side to side. As an Ibeki, she didn't need to wear clothes to conceal herself. She just used her own well-maintained fur. And as an Ibeki, instead of normal hands and feet, she had paws. After I fell back onto the ground, the Ibeki giggled. Then she said, "It's nice to see you too, Ray." I quickly sat up, having my right leg straight out, as I had my left bent up slightly and had my hands bracing me up from behind. In this position, I looked around at everything again, then turned back to the Ibeki and calmly asked, "Who are you, miss?" The husky's right ear pointed up as her left bent down, while she tilted her head slightly to the left as she asked, "You don't remember?" I looked at her confused as I shook my head slightly, and after a few seconds I regained myself as she moved her head to be normal again and continued, "Well, it was a long time ago. I guess I can forgive you for forgetting. How did I get here?" "You don't know?" she asked, her tail having stopped wagging. "Never mind." The Ibeki jerked her head to her right. She closed her eyes in anger and said, "Fine then. Be that way, you meanie. Can you please just tell me? First you need to apologize to me." "Are you serious? Shut your face." I moaned in irritation, yet gave in to the woman's demands and moved myself to cross my legs as I sat up, placing my hands on my knees. Afterwards, I said, "I'm sorry. There. Happy?" "No," she barked. "You have to apologize to me for being a meanie." "I did." "No, you're being a meanie." "What are you, fucking 6? And I don't mean that in dog ears." Becky just gave an angry growl at me, while she opened her eyes slightly to look over at me with a mean glare. With that, I gave a big sigh and said, "Fine. I'm really sorry." The Becky closed her eyes again and asked, "Sorry for what?" That angered me, knowing that she was just trying to get her way. However, I needed to know who she was and what was going on, seeing as I didn't have a clue. I bowed my head to her slightly as I closed my eyes and said, "I'm sorry that I'm being a meanie, and for being rude to you." "Now was that so hard?" she asked with a very nice tone. When I opened my eyes again and looked up at the Ibeki, she had moved closer to me, where she was less than 2 inches away. She had her legs crossed like mine, and her paws placed in between them. She also had her head turned to me with a light smile, her eyes open to stare at me sensually. She even had her tail wagging again at just her right side, which curled towards her slightly. "I like your wolf parts," she said. She then looked up and raised her left paw to rub my left ear, while she continued, "Especially your ears. They're so cute." Of course, with her now rubbing my sensitive wolf ears, I was even more uncomfortable than when the humans had done so. I even reacted slightly, trying to get her paw away, but I only raised my hands halfway before I lowered them, feeling no urge to stop the Ibeki. It just felt so good. Along with that, I was mesmerized by her eyes, unable to look away. She looked back down into my eyes, noticing I was enjoying what she was doing. Her own ears twitched a bit, then she moved her left paw from my left ear to my right as she said, "My name's Nanye." I continued to look deep into the Ibekie's eyes and whispered, "Nanye. I know I've heard that name before." She giggled, then moved her left paw to gently pet the back right side of my head, still rubbing my ear at the same time, as she said, "Of course you have. I told you you'd grow up to be a great and handsome prince one day, Ray." She then moved herself closer to me to sit on my lap. She raised her right paw to hold the back of my neck, while she hummed a gentle and beautiful tune. I tried to turn away as I shut my eyes to her and said, "Please stop." Nanye continued with what she was doing and said, "No, it's too much fun." She moved her right paw to make me look back into her eyes again, then raised both paws to rub both of my ears. She did it with such grace that I almost passed out. After a minute, I finally realized who the Ibeki really was, and said, "You're the one that spoke to Father for peace. Nanye Akato, leader of the..." Before I could finish, Nanye quickly and gently placed the tip of her right paw on my lips to get me to stay quiet as she said, "Was, leader, but things got too intense for us." She then removed her paw from my face to put it behind my neck again as she moved her left paw down with it, hanging onto me as she leaned back slightly and continued, "Ever since I talked to your father, all the Ibeki tribes that kept themselves hidden from the other races within Yotama started slowly ripping themselves apart, now hiding on their own and going off of just basic instinct. They all retreated from Yotama to other worlds, even to ones that I don't know of. They feared that when we revealed ourselves at that time, when I went to try to negotiate with your father on letting us keep our peace, we would face certain destruction." She gave me a bigger smile and joyfully said, "But none of that matters anymore." Then, out of the blue, Nanye lunged at me. She quickly threw her arms out to hug me and pushed me onto my back, while she said, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you again, Ray. I thought you'd never come." Boggled and uncomfortable at the situation, along with Nanye rubbing her head up against the left side of my face, I asked, "You were expecting me?" She braced herself up with both of her paws next to my shoulders, while she looked directly into my eyes and said, "Of course. Ever since I met you, I've been waiting for you to show yourself to me again. Your father may not have wished for us Ibekis to have peace and complete freedom, but he gave it to us on one condition, that I was to keep something secret from all of his followers. However..." Nanye moved herself closer to me, nearly touching our noses together, and continued, "I knew when he entrusted me with that secret, I was to see you again, because I had a feeling that you were the one. the Endelment. She giggled again, then quietly said, "Care to say something?" The two of us laid together in silence for about a minute. Then I quietly said one of the most rude things that you could say to anyone in that position. However, it technically was for the best. I asked, "Do you know that your breath smells really bad?" Nanye stared at me, confused, then quickly grew angry and slapped me across my face with her right paw. I was lucky she didn't extend her claws out. I shut my eyes tight before she hit me, my head turning to my right side from the strike. Afterwards, I raised my left hand to first fix my glasses onto my face, then moved it to where I was struck and said, "Fuck, that still hurts." Nanye moved herself to sit on top of my chest, with her back turned to my head and her arms crossed at her chest. At the same time, her agitated tail flicked across my face. "You may be handsome," she barked, "but you're an ass too." I then raised my right hand up at the right side of my face to keep Nanye's tail from hitting me, while she continued, "Here I am trying to help you, making you feel comfortable and letting you in on what's going on, but no. You just laid there and insulted me, probably not even paying any attention to me or what I was doing." "What were you doing exactly? Shut your face." Her tail was able to swing over my hand and directly onto my face, where I quickly and gently grabbed it to move it over to my right side away from me. However, just as I touched it, Nanye turned herself from her left to look back at me with an even more angry expression and yelled, "How dare you touch me?" "Is there a problem, Miss Akuto?" the gray wolf from before asked. The wolf walked towards us from my right, with two barn swallows now sitting on his head. One of the birds was the light blue swallow from before, and the other was almost completely black. The black one had an orange-red beak and orange-red claws, with pearl-white eyes. Nanye turned herself back to her right to look over at the wolf as she happily said, "Oh no, Koro, no problem. Ray's just trying to have dirty fun with me." "What?" I yelled. "You're lying." Nanye quickly swung her tail over me and slapped it hard on my face to halt me from speaking. Then she asked, "What are you guys here for?" The wolf and the two birds looked at her, confused. Then the blue swallow said, "What do you mean, what are you here for, G? You told us to come talk to you once we hid that ugly-ass stick thing." "Damn it," she said as she jerked her head to face forwards again. "I told you guys to do that tomorrow if he didn't show up." And then tried to blow away Nanye's tail from my face, but she just flicked it up and slapped me with it again. With that, she said, "Quit being a naughty boy, Ray." "Get your damn tail out my face," I barked. The blue swallow chirped a couple times, then the black swallow jumped slightly to turn to the blue one and said, "See, I told you two dumbbells that it was tomorrow." The blue swallow jumped to turn to the black one and said, "Oh yeah, right, whatever. Just quit being a bitch." "Whatever, Jonathan." "Shut up, Samantha." Koro shook his head to make the two birds fly up from him. Then when he stopped, they landed back on his head as the wolf said, "Knock it off, you two. I can't stand your bickering." Both birds shook themselves to have their feathers puff up as they chirped. And as their feathers started to lay down, John said, "Sorry, dog. My bad." Nanye sighed in irritation, then said, "Great. Thanks, guys." She then turned herself towards the three of them, with her tail still placed on my face, and said, "Now please leave me and Ray alone. We need to discuss something." I then tried to grab Nanye's tail again with my left hand, but she quickly grabbed my left wrist with her right paw and said, "Down, boy." "Alright then," Sam said. "See you two later." She pecked Koro's head twice, then said, "Giddy up, furball." As the wolf stood up and turned to walk away from Nanye and me, he said, "Peck me again, and I'll devour you both whole." Just as the three of them left, Nanye turned back to face me again and braced herself over me as she asked, "Now, where were we?" "What's going on?" I yelled. "I don't know why the hell I'm here or what any of you people are talking about. You're driving me crazy." "Jeez, no need to yell," she said, turning her head slightly to her right, bending her ears back. She sighed as she stood up and her ears pointed back up, then said, "Fine, get out." She then started walking towards the fruit tree behind her as she continued, "You need to be more polite, Zaec." Once I stood up, I brushed myself off and began following Niebeki as I said, "I'm not gonna give two shits." I walked at Nanye's right side and stopped at the one tree, where she tapped it with the back of her left paw a few times. The tree dropped 2 pieces of fruit from its branches, which she caught in her right paw by simply holding it out at her side. Afterwards, we started walking towards the large black mountain to the north. Oddly enough, John and Sam flew over to accompany us as both stood on my shoulders, John to my right and Sam to my left. We walked about half a mile in silence, then Nanye handed me the 2 pieces of fruit and said, "Here, take these." "What for?" I asked as I looked over at her and grabbed the fruit with my right hand. "Fruit from the realm of gods increases your stamina, plus it gives you a bit more strength and agility. You'll need it." I stopped walking just as I placed the fruit inside my left coat pocket and said, "What's going on? You still haven't told me." Nanye took a couple more steps forward, then she stopped and turned around to face me with a smile as she said, "Jeez, can't you ever lighten up?" I glared at the Ibeki, then said, "Either you tell me now, or I'll show you how I like to lighten up." Nanye's smile quickly went away as she became angry, then she sighed and looked down at the ground near her feet. After a moment, she looked back up at me and said, "That stick that John talked about a while ago is what we're going after. It's the hilt of Rokar. And now, since John and his friends were being idiots, only you can get it out from where it's hidden." She then stood with her arms crossed over her chest and said, "There, happy now? Or would it service you more if I got on my knees?" Quit being a bitch about this. She grew a bit angry at me. She turned to completely face me and said, "Not my fucking fault. For one, I'm a goddamn dog. And 2, you're a fucking idiot." "Hey, I got an idea," Sam said as she quickly flew over to hover in between Nanye and me, while she faced the Ibeki. "Why don't we forget everything that's happened and continue towards Cerberic's tomb, okay? That way..." Sam then turned to face me to continue what she was saying, but quickly noticed that I was staring down at her with such a mean gaze that it frightened her enough to be quiet. The last thing she said before moving to stand on Nanye's left shoulder was, "Never mind." I looked back over at the Ibeki and said, "Just tell me where to go and I'll get there on my own." "No," Nanye quickly replied, "and since you need my help to do anything around here, I'm not going to do anything for you till you lighten up." I stepped forwards as a means to threaten her, yet she did nothing. Then I spoke through my teeth and said, "Damn you." We just stared off again, then I sighed as I finally calmed down a bit and said, "Let me guess. You want me to do the meanie thing again, don't you?" Nanye just grew a smile. She continued to wait for me to speak. Amazingly, I too grew a smile as I tilted my head to my right slightly. I then glanced up at the sky and said, "Fine." When I looked back down at her, I continued, "I'm sorry that I was being a meanie again. Now can we please continue with our journey?" Nanye chuckled at that, then she replied, "Not quite." "Jeez, you're just like my daughter." She stepped closer to me and moved her arms to hold me around my waist, while she looked up into my eyes. Even though I knew if Serena was to ever find out about what happened next, I was going to get slapped hard for it. So, with Nanye's motion, I straightened my head up and wrapped my arms around her waist too. After getting closer, the Becky said, "I want you to promise me something." "What?" She moved her right arm to use her paw as to call me closer to her, where I leaned forward a bit, turned my head slightly to my right to have my left ear near her mouth. However, instead of whispering, Nanya did something else. When I lowered my head, she used her right paw to move my head to face her again. She locked lips with me, so we both closed our eyes for a few seconds. Then we opened our eyes to stare at each other in silence. Once the moment passed, I asked, "And? What's the promise?" Nanya just rolled her eyes as she let go of me and turned to head towards the northern mountain, while she said, "You're hopeless." As the Ibeki walked away, I grew a big smile as I stood up straight and swung my arms out from my sides slightly. At the same time, I asked, "What? Did I do something wrong?" "Forget it, Ray," she replied as she somewhat laughed. I started to follow as I sarcastically asked, "Was it because I didn't use my tongue?" "Just shut it." "Was it because I didn't kiss you with enough passion?" "Stop it." "Maybe it's because I didn't sniff your butt first?" Finally irritated, Nanya barked, "Shut up, Zaec." With that, we all just laughed for about a minute over what happened, while I tried to catch up to Nanya, so we headed towards the northern mountain. 10 minutes passed by in our quiet walk, with Nanya at my right side and John and Sam still on our shoulders. However, John broke the silence when he jumped to turn towards my head slightly and asked, "You know, I've heard about the Endelment, but I must know, what's your godly power like? How do you use it?" I glanced down at the bird and said, "You shit on me, and I'm gonna break your head off and shove it up your ass." "Hey, I ain't no damn pigeon, homeboy." John shook himself a bit, then continued, "Don't play me like that." "Oh, shut up, John," Sam said as she jumped to turn towards him. "Besides, you might not even know his godly powers." "Bitch, why you always arguing with me, huh? Why?" Sam shook herself, then she looked up at me and said, "Just forget him. He gets like this when he's around anyone that's not of the bird race, even though his best friend is a wolf." "Whatever," John said as he turned away. After a few more minutes, I asked, "Why are we walking?" "Because," Nanya replied, "once you reach the mountains, you can't use any of your powers. Don't ask why. And the effects only work on mortals, so it's best that you not only conserve your strength and energy, but keep yourself out of harm's way. Flying over to the mountains gets bad if you're going too fast or too high." I looked up at the mountains and asked, "So how did you become a god, Nanya?" "I didn't," she joyfully replied. "I was brought here by Kalita long ago, seeing as she knew that I had Rakar and needed a place to hide. What better place than the realm of gods? No one, not even your father, knows that it's here." Nanya then looked up at me and started to lightly nudge me on my right side with her left elbow. Each time she elbowed me, she said, "Hey." She did that about 4 times. I looked over at her on the final motion and asked, "What?" "Scratch my back." I moaned at her, then she whined, "Please, you've got nothing else to do." "I'd rather just do that. Nothing." Nanya gave a pathetic whine, and after a minute, I just gave up and continued to look forward as I said, "Fine." I raised my right hand behind Nanya to scratch her upper back. Then after a few seconds she said, "Lower." I moved my hand down an inch, and she moaned in pleasure. Then after another few seconds she said, "Lower." I moved my hand down just a bit below her mid-back, and she moaned again. Then once more, she said, Lower. It got to the point where I was at her waistline for about a minute, then she stopped moaning. Nanya wrapped her arms around my waist. She seductively said, lower, gentler, and more to the front. With that, I removed my hand from her and said, we're done here. Oh, come on, Ray, she said, removing her arms from me to playfully punch my upper right arm with her left paw. It's not like it'll mean anything. It will to me. I have a wife. That doesn't matter. Besides, you've already kissed me, so whatever you do next is nothing new. Nanya grabbed my right wrist with her left paw and said, so for now, I just want you to play with me. Let go of my arm, I said, turning my head slightly to look down at her in anger. Nanya stopped both of us from walking and gripped my wrist harder as she gave me an angry expression and yelled, I'm a fucking dog, damn it. So quit being an ass. I have needs too, you know. She then lowered her voice a bit and said, now I'm pissed. Either you do as I say until it's time for you to leave, or I'll leave this place right now, and you'll be stuck here till I feel like coming back. Now which is it? Just then, my right arm started to hurt even more. Not because of Nanya, but because of the anger that rushed through my veins, and I wanted so badly to slap her for what she was doing. However, I kept to myself as I turned to look at the Becky. John and Sam chirped a couple times when they saw us glaring at each other, then they just watched as we all stood in silence. It took a moment, but Nanya and I calmed down and apologized to each other, though I still believe she was to blame. We then continued on our way towards the mountains, with the two birds moving to lie on our heads. Once we started heading towards the mountain again, Nanya slowly and hesitantly let go of my wrist, where in actuality, I didn't want her to. Of course, I couldn't really say anything with how I was treating her. Maybe she didn't have any friends, thus her reasons for messing with me. I felt bad for her. I didn't know how or why. This concludes the reading of chapter 26. Thank you all for watching and listening. If you like what you've seen and heard, there'll be a link to my physical works in the description below. With that being said, stay safe, take care, we'll see you again next week, reading chapter 27.